Land policies and governance came under focus as an expert in land matters in Africa, Professor Kimani Njogu, highlighted its importance. Njogu spoke with the news agency of Nigeria at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa on the sidelines of a media masterclass. The masterclass is a precursor to the 2023 Conference on Land Policy in Africa, starting from November 21 to November 24. The conference, organized by African Land Policy Center, has the theme Promoting Sustainable Land Governance in Africa for Accelerated Implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area (AfCFTA). Njogu emphasized the importance of paying attention to land policy and governance as it involves power dynamics in decision-making.
When we deal with issues of land governance, we are dealing with the whole question of who gets to make the decisions on who accesses land, who owns land, as well as the processes that will be undertaken in making those decisions. Now, across Africa, we have a huge problem of people's access to land. So we have the tension between, for example, herders and farmers. We have tension between urbanization and farming and agriculture. We have tensions between, indigenous communities and new communities that get into the land and so on. So that calls for decisions. And those decisions are usually political decisions, which have economic as well as social implications. And therefore, it's in that context that we say in Africa we must pay particular attention to land policy as well as land governance, because it's also about issues of power. Who controls power in terms of decision making? Do the youth of Africa, for example, have access to land? Can they own land? Under what circumstances can they own land? And if it's women, do they own land? How can they access land and so on? How can we industrialize while at the same time not displace indigenous communities? How can we accelerate tourism and extract our natural resources without damaging people's lives and so on? So it's really about decision making, and it's an important thing for us to be paying attention to.
The conference is also aimed at exploring the intersection between land governance policies and trade in Africa within the context of the AfCFTA.
Part of the reason why we have the African Continental Free Trade Area was to allow for free movement of people as well as services across the continent. And we know that we have had challenges with African people moving from one country to the next, whether to do business or to sell their services or to provide goods, and so on. And we think that through land governance, we can, in fact, increase productivity across Africa, diversify what we are producing, because what Mozambique requires might be found in Nigeria. But how does it move, in terms of moving from Nigeria all the way to Mozambique? If it's, food products, for example, or clothing, our clothing, because our fashion comes from cotton, our clothing comes from cotton, which is drawn from land. So how do we diversify, the products that we are producing, where those are products for food or households or whatever, whether it is even furniture, with each other. So also, how do we create cross-border, zones, agribusiness zones and so on? How do we industrialize? How do we work together? And I think that the link between the land governance question is really about trading with each other, diversifying what we are trading with, allowing our people to move across Africa easily without having to be taxed too much, allowing our creative people, the young people who are working in the culture and creative industry to be moving around, also dealing with issues of climate change.
Although some African countries have made progress in establishing land commissions, Professor Njogu, however, emphasized the need for further action, especially in promoting trade and supporting agribusiness for diversified food options.
Yes, we have made tremendous progress because, again, if you look across Africa, a number of countries now have national land commissions. When we started, not many countries had national land commissions. There are a number of countries that have also made decisions about, women's access to land. There are also decisions that have been made by a number of countries in terms of how to manage their natural resources, as well as diversification of agricultural production and so on. So I think that we have been making progress. We still need to do much more going forward, especially with regard to how we can trade with each other to increase food security. Because you have a situation where one country has a lot of food, but the neighboring country does not have enough food, just because our people are not able to move across borders easily. There are certain constraints and so on. Or maybe we have challenges with infrastructure. The fact that our people are not able to move food from their farms to the urban spaces because you have not developed the road system or the rail systems and so on. So I think that it is important that even as we make progress, and we have been making progress, that we also think about how we can work together, really at the continental level as well as the regional level, to increase food security, to support each other in terms of agribusiness, to be able to diversify, the food options available, in our communities and so on.